I'm Tiffany, 29, and 3 weeks ago, my life turned upside down. I stood outside our family home in Asheville, North Carolina, my key useless in a changed lock. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister, Courtney. "You're not part of this family anymore. Don't come back." My stomach twisted as I reread those words, each one a punch I didn't see coming. Courtney and I had clashed before, but locking me out of the house we grew up in? That was a betrayal I never expected. I banged on the door, shouted her name, but got nothing, just silence. Then, 2 days later, an urgent email from her lawyer changed everything. Before I share the rest of this wild story, drop a comment with where you're watching from and hit subscribe to follow every shocking twist of my fight to take back my life. You won't believe what's next. Growing up in Asheville, North Carolina, my family's house was the kind of place people noticed, a modern two-story colonial that screamed success. But inside, it was a pressure cooker. And I learned fast that being Tiffany meant living under a microscope. My sister, Courtney, 5 years older, was the family's golden girl. She aced every test, charmed every client, and stepped into our parents' real estate business like it was her birthright. My parents, Marilyn and Philip Hayes, worshipped her. My mother ran the business with a hawk's focus, always planning 3 steps ahead. My dad handled the numbers quietly but unyieldingly, nodding along to whatever mother decided. And then there was me, the odd one out, always chasing a different dream. My grandmother, Clara Hayes, was my lifeline. She'd sit with me for hours, sketching fashion designs on scrap paper, her hands steady despite her age. "Tiffany, don't let anyone clip your wings," she'd say, her voice soft but fierce. Clara saw something in me, a spark she didn't see in Courtney or my parents. She'd sneak me fabric swatches, teach me to sew, and tell me stories of her own dreams, ones she'd buried to raise a family. Those moments with her felt like freedom, a world where I didn't have to be a real estate robot. But freedom didn't last. When I was 14, Clara got sick, cancer, fast and brutal. She passed 2 years later, and the hole she left never closed. After her death, Courtney took over like she'd been waiting for it. She was 21, already working with Mother at Hayes Realty, and suddenly she was calling shots at home too. My parents didn't blink. They handed her the reins, proud of their responsible daughter. I'd hear them at dinner. "Courtney closed another deal today." Or, "Courtney's got such a head for business." Meanwhile, my sketchbooks gathered dust, and my dreams of designing clothes were met with eye rolls. "Fashion's a hobby, Tiffany," Mother would say, her tone final. "Real estate's your future." By high school, the house felt like a battlefield. I'd stay up late designing outfits, posting them on social media, getting likes from strangers who saw what my family couldn't. But every time I brought it up, Courtney shut me down. "You're wasting your time," she'd snap, flipping her hair like she owned the world. "Nobody makes money doodling dresses." Dad would just shrug. Mother would add, "Hayes women build empires, not wardrobes." I pushed back hard. I joined the school's art club, entered design contests, even won a few. But the more I fought for my passion, the tighter their grip got. College was my breaking point. I wanted to study fashion design, maybe at Parsons or FIDM, but my parents had other plans. "You're going to UNC business major," Mother declared, sliding a brochure across the table. Courtney smirked, already a junior there, top of her class. I argued, begged, showed them my portfolio. Nothing worked. "We're not paying for some artsy nonsense," Dad said flatly. So I compromised, or thought I did. I enrolled in business, but minored in design, working nights at a local boutique to pay for supplies. Courtney graduated, joined Hayes Realty full-time, and became Mother's right hand. I was invisible, except when they needed someone to blame. After college, I landed a job at a small fashion startup in Charlotte. The pay was awful, but I was designing, finally living Clara's dream for me. I'd visit home for holidays, but it was always tense. Courtney would grill me, still playing with scissors. Mother would sigh. "You could have been running listings by now." Dad barely spoke, just stared at his plate. I kept my head down, saving every penny to build my own brand. Then the startup tanked, funding dried up, and I was out of a job. With rent due and my savings gone, I had no choice. I asked to move back home just for a few months. Courtney was furious. "You're 29, Tiffany, not 19, she said, arms crossed in the living room. Mother agreed. This isn't a hotel, but Dad, for once, stepped in. "She's family," he muttered, and they relented. I moved into my old room, promising to stay 6 months max. From day one, it was hell. Courtney set rules like I was a kid, curfews, chores, even a rent payment I could barely afford from freelance gigs. Mother watched my every move, dropping hints about job openings at Hayes Realty. "You're not getting any younger," she'd say, her voice sharp. Dad stayed out of it, as usual. The tension built like a storm. I'd spend days applying for design jobs, pitching my portfolio to brands, but every rejection stung more under their roof. Courtney was relentless. "You're mooching off us," she'd hiss, catching me sketching late at night. "Why can't you just grow up?" I tried to contribute, paid what I could, cooked dinners, cleaned, but nothing was enough. The final straw came 3 weeks ago. I pitched an idea to digitize Hayes Realty's listings, create virtual tours, maybe even a social media campaign. I thought it could help show I wasn't useless. Courtney laughed in my face. "Stick to your crayons," she said, her eyes cold. Mother nodded, and Dad looked away. That night, we exploded. I called Courtney out, her control, her jealousy, how she'd always hated Clara's faith in me. She screamed back, accusing me of leeching, of dragging the family down. "You're a failure, Tiffany," she spat, her face inches from mine. "Clara was wrong about you." That cut deeper than anything. I grabbed my bag, stormed out to clear my head, and spent the night at a cheap motel. The next morning, I had a job interview. Not my dream gig, but a start. I texted Courtney I'd be back to talk, thinking we could cool off. I never imagined she'd take it this far, that by evening, I'd be locked out of my own home. I'd stormed out of our family home in Asheville, my bag slung over my shoulder, promising myself I'd cool off and talk to her later. I checked into a cheap motel near downtown, the kind with flickering lights and thin walls, figuring I'd be back home by evening. The next morning, I had a job interview, a junior designer position at a local fashion brand. It wasn't my dream job, but it was a lifeline, a chance to get back on my feet. I pulled on my best blazer, practiced my pitch in the motel mirror, and sent Courtney a text. "I'll be back tonight. Let's talk." I hit send, hoping we could dial back the venom from last night. I never expected what came next. The interview went better than I dared to hope. The hiring manager liked my portfolio, said my designs had a fresh edge. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of optimism. Maybe I could rebuild without my family's constant jabs. I left the office around 4 p.m., my mind racing with possibilities, planning what I'd say to Courtney to smooth things over. "I'm trying." "Okay, I just need a little time." I rehearsed gripping the steering wheel as I drove back to the house. I pulled into the driveway just after 4:30, the familiar colonial looming ahead, its windows catching the late afternoon light. Everything looked normal, too normal. I grabbed my key, walked to the front door, and slid it into the lock. It didn't turn. I jiggled it, thinking it was stuck, but nothing gave. My pulse quickened as I tried again, harder, the metal scraping uselessly. "What the hell?" I muttered, knocking on the door. "Courtney, Mom, Dad," no answer. I moved to the side door by the garage, the one we always used growing up. Same thing. My key went in but wouldn't budge. A cold dread settled in my chest as I circled to the back door, trying one last time. Nothing. Every lock had been changed. Standing on the back porch, I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and called Courtney. Straight to voicemail. I tried my mother Marilyn's voicemail. My dad Philip's. The same panic clawed at me as I dialed my cousin Justin Porter, who lived an hour away in Charlotte. "Justin, something's wrong," I said when he picked up, my voice trembling. "I can't get into the house. The locks are different, and nobody's answering." There was a long pause. "Tiffany, check your texts," Justin said, his tone heavy. I pulled the phone from my ear and saw a new message from Courtney, sent during my drive home. "You're not part of this family anymore," it read. "Don't come back. Your stuff's boxed up. Pick it up Saturday to 5 p.m. We won't be here." I stared at the screen, the words blurring as my breath caught. My sister had locked me out of our family home, the place I'd lived my entire childhood, the place I'd come back to when I had nowhere else to go. Through the shock, I typed back, my fingers fumbling, "You think this is okay? Wait till I figure this out." It was pure bravado inside. I was crumbling. "Justin, did you know about this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, the phone back at my ear. "Not until this morning," he said, sounding uneasy. "Courtney called me, said you two fought and she was done." I didn't know she'd go this far. Done. She'd changed the locks while I was at an interview. Cut me off without a word. "All my stuff's in there," I said, my voice cracking, my designs, my laptop, my passport, everything. "Justin, look. Give her a day to calm down. Maybe stay at a friend's place." I didn't have the heart to tell him I'd already burned through my cash on the motel. I hung up and sat on the porch steps, staring at the back door like it might magically open. Through the kitchen window, I saw movement, Courtney, her back to me, moving dishes like nothing had happened. She knew I was here, and she didn't care. Rage replaced shock as I banged on the window. Courtney opened the door. I shouted, but she didn't even flinch. I called again, voicemail. My parents' phones were still off. I was locked out alone with nowhere to go. The reality hit like a freight train. I wasn't just homeless. I was erased. My clothes, my sketchbooks, my entire life were trapped inside that house, and my own sister had slammed the door shut. I drove back to the motel, my hands shaking so badly I nearly swerved off the road. That night, I couldn't sleep, the cheap mattress creaking under me, as I scrolled through my phone, desperate for a distraction. Then I saw a post on Courtney's Instagram, a photo of her, mother, and dad at the kitchen table, smiling over takeout. The caption, "Family night, nothing better." My heart shattered. They were acting like I didn't exist, like they hadn't just thrown me out. The next morning, I woke up disoriented. The motel's stale air heavy in my lungs. My phone was dead. I'd forgotten my charger in the house. I used the motel's Wi-Fi to check my bank account, hoping to scrape together enough for another night. That's when I got the second blow. My joint account with Courtney, the one we'd set up years ago for shared expenses, was empty. $850 gone. The bank app showed a withdrawal by the primary account holder, her, the day before. I called the bank, my voice shaking. "There's nothing we can do," the representative said. "You're a secondary holder." Courtney hadn't just locked me out of the house, she'd cut me off financially, too. I sat on the motel bed, staring at the peeling wallpaper, trying to piece together a plan. I had no job, no savings, and now no home. I emailed the design firm for my interview asking for an update, but got an auto-reply saying they'd get back to me next week. I called Justin again, hoping he'd heard something. "Courtney's not budging," he said. "She told me, you're ungrateful that you've been freeloading." I tried to talk to Aunt Marilyn, but she's on Courtney's side. Freeloading. I'd paid what I could, worked my ass off to contribute, but to them, I was nothing. By noon, I drove back to the house, hoping to catch someone leaving. The driveway was empty. Mother and Dad were probably at the office. Courtney at a showing. I sat in my car, staring at my childhood bedroom window, wondering how it had come to this. A neighbor, Mrs. Larson, waved from her yard. "Tiffany, everything okay?" she called, her brow furrowed. I forced a smile, humiliation burning my cheeks. "Just locked out," I said, keeping it vague. She nodded but didn't press, and I drove away feeling smaller than ever. That afternoon, I used the motel's computer to job hunt, applying for anything retail, waitressing, even temp work. Every click felt like a surrender, but I had no choice. Then my phone buzzed with a new email. My heart stopped when I saw the sender, Walsh and Foster Law Firm. Subject, Urgent Hayes Family Trust. I opened it, expecting some legal threat from Courtney, but the words didn't make sense. It mentioned my grandmother, Clara Hayes, and a trust I'd never heard of. "Please contact us immediately." It ended with a number for Edward Walsh. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. What had Clara done? And why was Courtney's lawyer reaching out now? Sleep didn't come that night. I lay on the motel bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every memory of Grandma Clara. She'd been my safe haven, the one who saw me when my family didn't. I remembered her last visit a year before she passed, when she pulled me aside at a family dinner. "Tiffany, promise me you'll keep designing," she whispered, her eyes fierce. "No matter what they say." I'd nodded, assuming it was just her usual encouragement. Now, with this email, I wondered if she'd meant something more. Had Clara known Courtney, or my parents would try to crush me? The next morning, I drove to Walsh and Foster's office in downtown Asheville, a sleek glass building that made me feel out of place in my wrinkled blouse and faded jeans. My stomach churned as I rode the elevator to the 10th floor, clutching my phone like a lifeline. The receptionist, a polished woman in her 40s, ushered me into a conference room with leather chairs and a view of the Blue Ridge Mountains. Edward Walsh entered moments later, tall, silver-haired, his suit sharp enough to cut glass. "Hayes, thank you for coming," he said, gesturing to a seat. "I understand you're in a difficult situation." "That's an understatement," I said, my voice tighter than I meant. "My sister locked me out of our family home, and now I'm getting emails from her lawyer." "What's going on?" Edward's expression didn't waver. "I'm not your sister's lawyer, Miss Hayes. I represent the Clara Hayes Trust established by your grandmother before her death." My breath caught. A trust Clara had never mentioned anything like that. Edward opened a thick folder on the table. "Your grandmother was a remarkable woman," he said. "She set up this trust to protect her assets, including the family home, and to ensure her wishes were honored, particularly for you." I leaned forward, my heart pounding. "What wishes? What does this have to do with me?" Edward slid a document across the table, its legal jargon dense but clear. On one point, the house in Asheville, the one Courtney had locked me out of, belonged to the Clara Hayes Trust, not my parents or my sister. "The primary condition," Edward explained, "is that the home remains a residence for all direct Hayes family members, including you, Tiffany, whenever you need it. Your sister and parents, Marilyn and Philip, are trustees, but their rights to live there depend on your guaranteed access." The words hit like a thunderbolt. The house wasn't theirs to control. It was Clara's, and she'd made sure I'd always have a place in it. "So Courtney changing the locks, that's against the trust?" I asked, my voice shaking. Edward nodded. "Precisely. When your keys failed to open the doors, it triggered an alert in the trust's monitoring system. Your grandmother anticipated potential family tensions." I sat back stunned. Clara had seen this coming. She'd known Courtney's jealousy and my parents' control could spiral into something like this. "There's more," Edward continued, pulling out another document. "The trust includes a financial fund designated for your creative pursuits, fashion design specifically. According to our records, you've never accessed these funds despite working multiple jobs to support your career." My jaw dropped. "A fund for me?" I whispered, my mind racing back to college waitressing nights to buy fabric, scraping by while Courtney and my parents watched, never mentioning a dime. Edward's face darkened. "As trustees, your family was obligated to inform you of this fund. We've uncovered withdrawals, significant ones, that don't align with its purpose." He slid over a financial summary, and my eyes locked on the total, $120,000 siphoned from the trust over 4 years, spent on home renovations, a new kitchen, a master suite, a backyard deck. "They used my money to remodel the house," I said, my voice flat, betrayal sinking in like a blade. Edward nodded. "It appears so. This constitutes a serious breach of fiduciary duty. We're conducting a full audit, but the preliminary findings are troubling." I felt the room tilt, the weight of their deception crushing me. Not only had Courtney locked me out of a house that wasn't hers to control, but she and my parents had been stealing from a fund Clara meant for me, my dreams. "Why now?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Why are you contacting me now?" Edward leaned forward. "The trust has safeguards, a local contact. Someone Clara trusted reported the lockout. We cross-checked with the key alert system and acted immediately. A local contact." My mind flashed to Mrs. Larson, the neighbor who'd waved at me yesterday, her eyes full of concern. Had Clara enlisted her to watch over me before I could even ask? Edward handed me a USB drive. "This contains the trust documents and a personal letter from your grandmother," he said. "Read them carefully before deciding your next steps." I took the drive, my hands trembling, and left the office. The Asheville skyline blurred outside the window. Back at the motel, I plugged the USB into my phone's adapter, my heart pounding as I opened Clara's letter dated 6 months before her death. "My dearest Tiffany," it began, her familiar handwriting filling the screen. "If you're reading this, things have gone wrong, and for that, I'm sorry. I've watched your family try to mold you into someone you're not. And I feared their control would tighten after I'm gone. This trust is my way of giving you wings even from beyond. The house is yours to call home always. And the fund is for your designs, your heart's work. You're stronger than you know, braver than they'll ever admit. Don't let them dim your light. All my love, Grandma Clara." I read it 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Clara hadn't just loved me. She'd built a fortress to protect me, knowing Courtney's jealousy could turn vicious. I called Justin, my cousin, needing to hear a familiar voice. "Did you know about this trust?" I asked, my voice thick. He hesitated. "Not the details, but Grandma Clara talked about you a lot before she passed. She said Courtney was jealous. Always had been since you two were kids. Clara gave you her sketchbooks, her sewing kit, things Courtney wanted." The pieces clicked into place. Courtney's snide remarks, her fury whenever I mentioned Clara, it wasn't just control. It was resentment festering for years. Justin's voice dropped. "Courtney tried to get Clara to change her will. Clara refused. I think that's why Courtney's so hard on you now." I hung up, my mind a whirlwind. Clara's trust wasn't just about money or a house. It was her way of standing up for me, of giving me a chance to fight back. But what now? Edward had mentioned options, forcing the trust, forcing Courtney to let me back in or something else. I wasn't sure I wanted to live under the same roof as my sister, not after this. But one thing was clear, I couldn't let them get away with it. Clara had believed in me, and for the first time since that text from Courtney, I felt a spark of resolve. I wasn't just fighting for a key to a house. I was fighting for my life, for the dreams Grandma Clara knew I could chase. Grandma Clara's letter, her words about my courage, ignited a spark I'd long buried. Courtney had gone too far, locking me out of our family home in Asheville and plundering a trust meant to protect me. With the Clara Hayes trust documents as my shield, I was ready to confront her. Edward Walsh, the trust's lawyer, set up a meeting at his firm's office, a neutral battleground for what I knew would be explosive. "Focus on the facts, Tiffany," he said over the phone, his voice steady. "The trust speaks louder than words." My heart raced, but I steeled myself for the fight ahead, knowing Grandma Clara was with me in spirit. The meeting was scheduled for Tuesday at 10 a.m., 5 days after I'd uncovered the trust. I spent those days dissecting every page of the documents, etching the violations into my memory. The house wasn't Courtney's or my parents'. It belonged to the trust, and my right to live there was absolute. The financial fund, $120,000 drained for home upgrades, was a betrayal I couldn't unsee. I called my cousin Justin Porter to make sure he'd be there. "I've got your back, Tiff," he said, his tone resolute. "Grandma Clara would have wanted you to stand up." His words steadied me, but the thought of facing Courtney's glare and my parents' silence knotted my stomach. Tuesday morning, I arrived at Walsh and Foster's office early, my borrowed blazer feeling like armor. The conference room was stark, polished mahogany table, towering windows, and an air thick with anticipation. Edward greeted me, his suit impeccable, and introduced Ms. Carter, an associate taking notes. A financial advisor from the trust's team sat poised with audit records. At precisely 10 a.m., the door swung open and my family entered. Courtney strode in first, chin high, eyes cold. Marilyn and Philip followed, their faces guarded, trailed by their lawyer, Ms. Foster, a family friend whose smile didn't reach her eyes. Justin slipped in last, offering me a quick nod of support. Tension coiled in the room as we sat. Courtney stared at her nails, avoiding me. Marilyn gripped her purse so tightly her knuckles went white, while Philip kept his eyes fixed on the table, jaw tight. Ms. Foster adjusted her glasses, her demeanor cool. Edward opened the proceedings, his voice cutting through the silence. "We're here to address breaches of the Clara Hayes Trust, namely, the denial of Tiffany Hayes's residence rights and the misuse of designated funds." Courtney's lips twitched, but she held her tongue. Edward passed out trust documents, pages heavy with truth. The trust mandates Tiffany's access to the family home. Changing the locks is a clear violation. Ms. Foster leaned forward, tone measured. My clients regret any misunderstanding with the locks, but this was a family matter, not a deliberate breach. Edward's gaze sharpened. A family matter doesn't justify barring a beneficiary for 5 days without remedy. He nodded to the financial advisor, who displayed a damning spreadsheet. Our audit reveals $120,000 withdrawn from Tiffany's creative fund, spent on home renovations, a gourmet kitchen, a master suite, a backyard deck. The figures burned into the room, unassailable. Courtney finally broke her silence, her voice slicing the air. That money improved the house, which Tiffany benefited from. I snapped back, unable to restrain myself. Benefited? I'm homeless. Courtney, you took my money. Grandma Clara's money for your luxury upgrades. Her eyes flared, but Marilyn interjected, voice wavering. Tiffany, we were thinking of the family's future. Philip gave a curt nod, his silence louder than words. Miss Foster tried to pivot. These were clerical oversights, not intentional misuse. Edward's reply was steel. Diverting funds meant for Tiffany's career without her consent is a fiduciary violation, not an oversight. Justin's voice cut through calm but piercing. Grandma Clara told me about the trust before she died. She wanted Tiffany safe, especially from this. He turned to Courtney, unflinching. You pressured her to rewrite her will, didn't you? To cut Tiffany out. The room went still. Courtney's face drained of color, her hands clenching the table. That's nonsense, she spat, but her voice shook. Justin pressed on. Clara said, you were jealous, bitter, that she gave Tiffany her sketchbooks, her trust, her heart. Marilyn's breath hitched, and Philip stared at Courtney, his composure cracking. Edward capitalized on the moment. Ms. Hayes's actions activated the trust's safeguards. We have text messages, bank statements, and renovation invoices. He handed a folder to Ms. Foster, whose eyes darted across the evidence, her confidence faltering. Tiffany Edwards, Edward said, turning to me. Would you like to speak? I met Courtney's glare, my voice steady despite the storm inside. You've controlled me my whole life, you Marilyn, Philip. You buried my dreams, locked me out when I needed you. And worst of all, you betrayed Grandma Clara. She trusted you to protect me, but you stole $120,000 meant for my designs. Courtney's eyes blazed. You're selfish, Tiffany. We gave you a home, a future, and you squandered it on your silly drawings. Her words cut, but I held firm. They're not drawings, Courtney. They're my life. Grandma Clara understood that, even if you never will. Marilyn's tears spilled over. We only wanted you to thrive, she said, her voice breaking. I shook my head. No, Marilyn. You wanted me to be Courtney. To fit your mold. That's control, not love. Philip stayed mute, his face etched with shame, offering no defense. Edward stepped in, his tone unyielding. Clara foresaw this conflict. Her letter, shared with all parties, details her concerns about controlling behavior. He distributed copies. As Courtney read Grandma Clara's words, her defiance wilted. The letter was raw, exposing her jealousy and my parents' complicity. Miss Foster whispered to Courtney, who nodded tightly, jaw clenched. Edward shifted focus. We need a path forward that upholds the trust. Tiffany, your proposal. I pulled out a document, voice calm but resolute. I'm not after vengeance. I want freedom. First, the trust purchases a condo for me using the creative fund you drained. I'll build my career my way. Second, you keep the house, but an independent trustee oversees every cent to prevent further theft. Third, we part ways. No contact, no manipulation, no more lies. Courtney's eyes widened, breath sharp. Marilyn's tears fell silently. Philip stared at the floor. Miss Foster conferred with Courtney, who shook her head. What if we say no? Courtney asked, voice low. Edward replied, his words precise. The trust's terms will be enforced, removal as trustees, recovery of misappropriated funds, and possible eviction from the home. Miss Foster's expression hardened as she consulted Marilyn and Philip. After a taut pause, she spoke. We'll review the proposal within 48 hours. Edward nodded. The trust demands swift resolution. As the meeting ended, Courtney stood, brushing past me without a glance. Marilyn paused, eyes pleading. "Tiffany, we didn't mean for this," she said softly. I met her gaze unflinching. "But it happened, Marilyn. And you allowed it." She flinched, then left. Philip lingered, voice barely audible. "I failed you," he muttered more to himself before following. Justin stayed his hand on my shoulder. "You are incredible, Tiff," he said. Grandma Clara would have cheered. I forced a smile, heart heavy with relief and loss. Edward escorted me to the elevator. "You've changed the game, Tiffany," he said. "That's no small feat." I clutched the documents, the weight of my stand sinking in. I'd faced Courtney, my parents, and their lies, holding them to account. But the fight wasn't done. Not until the proposal was signed. Not until I had my own ground to stand on. As the elevator descended, I thought of Grandma Clara, her unwavering faith in me, and knew this was only the beginning. 47 hours later, Edward Walsh called with news that felt like a weight lifting off my chest. My family had signed the proposal. Courtney, Marilyn, and Philip had agreed to my terms. The Clara Hayes Trust would buy me a condo using funds from the creative account they'd drained. They'd keep the family home in Asheville, but an independent trustee would watch every cent. Most importantly, we'd go our separate ways, no contact, no strings, no more battles. It wasn't the dramatic victory I'd half expected, with tears and apologies. It was quieter, messier, but it was mine. For the first time in my life, I'd stood up to their control and won. A month later, I stood in the living room of my new condo, a modest one-bedroom in a vibrant Asheville neighborhood. Sunlight poured through wide windows, catching the bare walls I'd soon fill with my own designs. The space was small, but it felt boundless, a canvas for a life I could shape without Courtney's shadow or my parents' expectations. The trust had covered the condo purchase and set up a monthly stipend to tide me over while I rebuilt. My belongings, once held hostage in the family home, arrived on a tense Saturday afternoon. Justin helped unload his pickup truck, packed with boxes of sketchbooks, fabric swatches, and my laptop. Courtney wasn't there. She'd left the key with a neighbor, avoiding me entirely. Marilyn sent a stiff text, "We hope you're okay." I didn't reply. Philip said nothing, as always. Unpacking felt like reclaiming pieces of myself. I found Grandma Clara's old sewing kit tucked in a box, alongside her note for her little designer. I traced her handwriting, tears pricking my eyes. She'd known I'd need this, not just the condo or the money, but the courage to break free. That night, I sat cross-legged on the floor, sketching my first collection for a fashion brand I'd dreamed of launching. Each line felt like a promise, to Clara, to myself, that I wouldn't let their betrayal define me. The hardest part wasn't the silence from my family. It was the void they left. I'd spent years chasing their approval, bending myself to fit their mold. Letting go of that felt like losing a limb, even if it was one that had always hurt. I started therapy with Dr. Sharon Coleman, a warm woman who specialized in family dynamics. "You're rewriting your story, Tiffany," she said in our first session, her voice gentle but firm. "That's painful, but it's powerful." She helped me untangle the guilt, the nagging voice that said I'd torn the family apart. They made choices. She reminded me, "You're making yours." Slowly, I learned to release the past, to see their control as their burden, not mine. Justin became my anchor. We'd never been close growing up. He was older, living in Charlotte. But the trust brought us together. Over coffee one weekend, he opened up about Grandma Clara. "She worried about you," he said, stirring his latte. "Courtney's jealousy wasn't new. Clara saw it when you were kids, how Courtney resented the time she spent with you." I nodded, remembering Courtney's snide remarks about Clara's sketchbooks. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked. Justin shrugged, eyes soft. "I thought you'd figure it out." "And you did." We laughed, a rare moment of lightness, and I realized he was family in a way Courtney never could be. With the condo as my base, I threw myself into my career. The trust stipend let me breathe, so I could chase opportunities I'd once only dreamed of. I applied to a fashion accelerator program, pitching my collection, bold, vibrant designs inspired by Asheville's art scene. To my shock, I got in. The program connected me with mentors, fabric suppliers, and a small team to bring my vision to life. I launched my brand, Clara's Thread, a nod to Grandma Clara's legacy. My first online drop sold out in days, and the orders kept coming. A local boutique reached out, wanting to stock my pieces. It wasn't fame or fortune, not yet, but it was a start. Proof I could build something real. The biggest shift was my sense of home. For years, I'd tied it to that house in Asheville, to a family that never truly saw me. Now, I was building a new one, not of blood, but of choice. Justin visited often, bringing stories of his own life, his own dreams. I made friends in the fashion program, artists and creators who cheered my wins and shared my late-night sketches. Dr. Coleman became a guide, helping me set boundaries I'd never known I needed. "Family isn't where you're born," she said once, her words echoing Clara's. "It's where you're free to be you." 6 months after the settlement, my life felt like my own. Courtney, Marilyn, and Philip faded into the background. No calls, no texts, just silence. I heard through Justin that Courtney was struggling to adjust to the new trustee's oversight, her control over the house slipping. Marilyn started therapy, grappling with her role in our rift. Philip stayed quiet, but Justin said he seemed regretful, carrying a weight he'd never voice. I didn't dwell on it. Their choices were theirs. Mine were here, in my condo, my studio, my designs. One morning, as I prepped for a meeting with a potential investor, an email stopped me cold, an invitation to showcase Clara's Thread at a regional fashion expo. It was the kind of break I'd barely dared to imagine. I stood in my condo, sketches spread across the table, and picked up a framed photo of Grandma Clara, her smile fierce and knowing. "You saw this, didn't you?" I whispered, my voice thick. "You knew I could do it." In that moment, I felt her with me, her faith, a steady hand on my shoulder. As I headed out the door, portfolio in hand, I glanced around my condo, my home, my sanctuary. Grandma Clara had given me more than a trust. She'd given me the chance to break a cycle of control and carve my own path. The road ahead wasn't easy, but it was mine, built on truth and courage. I closed the door behind me, ready for whatever came next, knowing I was finally free.